Wholesalers road shows have been a fundamental part of the distribution landscape for as long as I've been in the business. And some of those road shows are wildly successful and others, well, frankly, could use improvement. At Wholesaler Mastermind Speakers Bureau, we have a road show program that enables you to use one of our speakers at a most affordable price point for multiple engagements before, during, and after the road show. We also have Wholesaler Mastermind Speakers Bureau conference success plans, which allows you to build engagement at the conference, at your breakout session, delivering attendees to the breakout session, and your follow-up process after the conference. If you want more information about either Wholesaler Mastermind Speakers Bureau roadshows or conference success plans, head out to wholesalermasterminds.com, look for the link for Wholesaler Mastermind Speakers Bureau, or visit us at wmspeakers.com. So here's a question for you, wholesalers. Last time you did a presentation in front of a group of advisors or stood up at a conference to make an important presentation or road show, how effectively did you tell stories? You know, sometimes when I'm working with clients, and I don't do presentation training per se, but sometimes they'll ask me some questions while coaching clients about their presentation skills. And we work on openings. How do you open a meeting, as an example? And then for too many wholesalers, opening means, hey, thanks for having me in today. It's really delightful to be here. I want to cover X, Y, and Z. And as soon as you've said it's delightful to be here, half the audience is undoubtedly tuning out. And we always talk about the importance of story, which is why I'm absolutely delighted to present you with today's show. Welcome to the only podcast on the planet dedicated to exploring the art, science, and lifestyle of wholesalers and their leaders. This is the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. I'm your host, the founder of Wholesaler Masterminds, Rob Shore. Wholesalers, welcome back to the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. Today's guest is a speaker, executive coach, and corporate storyteller. He combines 2 decades of experience as a top leadership development executive with well-established career in performing arts. He has a passion for helping leaders enhance their presence, connect authentically with others, and tell engaging stories. He helps sales leaders bring their products and services to life in a compelling and relevant way, connecting to every person in the room. Rob Salafia is the founder and president of Protagonist Consulting Group. He's highly skilled working one-on-one as well as facilitating small and large group learning sessions. Rob is a lecturer in MIT Sloan School of Management and an executive coach for MIT's Sloan Fellows, AMP, and EMBA Programs. His clients are many amongst the Fortune 500, including Bernstein, American Express, ING Bank, as well as Fidelity. Rob Salafia, welcome to the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show.
I love the introduction. More than anything else, I love the way you use your voice.
Oh, well, thank you.
I love the way you use your voice because a great story needs to be engaging.
Oh.
And you kicked it off nicely. All the other stuff is just, hoopla, but you brought me in with your voice. Thank you for having me on your show.
Well, it's very generous of you to say that, and we are delighted to have you here. So let's start with setting the table here.
Great.
I know, you're not the only person to talk about storytelling. Lots of people fashion themselves as craftspersons, whatever that is, of storytelling. But I want to set the baseline here. From your vantage point, especially with that background in performing arts, what is storytelling and why should we think about using it?
Yeah, it's a great question. Stories do something that is remarkable that just bullets and facts cannot do. Stories engage people. They allow people to, they actually disengage the critical mind. So if someone is in an audience and their arms are folded, what's in their mind? They're thinking like, okay, why should I listen to you? And as soon as you start with an image or some kind of a putting that person into the story, like you engage, all of a sudden they perk up because we're hardwired to listen to stories. That's just the beginning, we can move people.
You said something there that's so important. I want to make sure that our audience heard that. Wholesalers, did you hear what he said? Disengage the critical mind. And how much time, wholesalers, do we spend in front of advisors and their entire point of view, their entire mindset is set to critical? So if for no other reason, if you can disengage the critical mind, getting better at stories is going to serve you well. Now, I want to go to something that was in the notes that you provided for me, and I thank you for those. You had an aha moment when you were meeting with folks at Walt Disney. And I want you to tell me a little bit about that story, because the question that they proposed, or that woman posed to you, is really interesting. I'd like to know more about that.
Well, I'm in a meeting with folks from Disney and leadership development folks, and we're talking about presence and storytelling. That's what we're talking about. Okay. At the end of the meeting, she turns to me and says, "So, Rob, how would you like us to think about you?" I sat back in my chair. She was on the phone. I saw looking at the person. It was like I fumbled an answer. Honest to God, I fumbled an answer, and I talked around it. As soon as I went home, I went, "Think of me like this. Think of me like this," and I started to write. I just started to write from that starting point. Think of me as an extended member of your team. Think of me as someone that is a partner with you. I'm a thinking partner with you. Think of someone that I will challenge you when you need to be challenged. And all of those things, that's what I started to write down. And I'm still thinking about that question 3 years later.
It really is a challenging question. I mean, it just, when I read it, I started scratching my head. I'm like, geez, how do I want my audience to think about me? How do I want my clients to think about me? How do I want my family and friends to think about me? It's really an interesting question. We won't spend too much time there, but boy, that one resonated.
But if you think about it like this, it is your brand. In other words, it becomes sticky. And so I think of personal brand as an experience. It's how people experience you, physically, energetically, emotionally, intellectually. It's how they experience themselves when they're with you. Do they feel valued by you? It's also the story they tell about you when you're gone. Mm. And that is what wholesalers, I think, if you think about it from that perspective, you want to be memorable. You want your stories to be memorable as well. It's how you show up and engage with people.
Obviously, or maybe not so obviously to you, Rob, I don't know if you hit the nail right on the head, because we spend a lot of time talking about what's your MQ, what's your memorability quotient, what allows you to stand out from the sea of sameness. And if you're able to either hardwire or rewire a center of influence, a financial advisor, a prospect, an existing client, if you're able to get inside their head by virtue of the stories that you tell, this is a very, very powerful tool that you have in your tool belt. When do you use stories? When am I supposed to use a story? I mean, I can't spend my day in a world of storytelling, or can I? Because I actually do have hard facts and figures I need to bestow upon the client. It's part of my job.
It's a really good question, and sometimes it's defining. It's your definition of a story. A story can be 6 words. It can be a good question. It can just, like, I think I sent you this idea. When somebody says to you, "So what do you do?" And you say, "Well, I'm a financial advisor with such and such a company." Click, they turn off. If you said to them, what do I do? I get people to live their dreams. And the person goes, "What?" It creates a little anticipation. That's the essence of a story, anticipation. Mm. So how does the person respond? Well, how do you do that? And then you lead with a question. Well, let me ask you a question. Do you have any dreams that you feel are unattainable, that you'll never get to live? And all of a sudden, that person is like, you're in a conversation with that person. You've just opened a door. And now all you have to do is listen to that person's story. That's your job, is to ask the most powerful question you can ask at that time. That's a powerful story in and of itself. It tells a story about who you are, that you care about someone else, and that you're not just there telling how smart you are.
You know, sometimes we think about stories, or maybe it's just me. I think about it has to be a recollection. I have to be able to, tell that pithy tale of something that happened to me when I was 21 years old, or I need to recount something that happened in my 35-year-old career, or but it doesn't have to be that. From what I hear you saying, you can craft what you're saying in a story format. It doesn't have to necessarily be a fable, if you will.
Well, the story that you just identified is usually a values-based story, and it's a powerful story to help people understand who you are and what's important to you. It's a great leadership story. When we're talking about wholesalers, it's how do you differentiate yourself? How do you be memorable? So it's a story. It's how do you draw a story about someone else? And you get on stage. Let's say you're a wholesaler and you bring in a great speaker to a group of advisors. When you get on that stage, how do you introduce that person that really sets that person up? It isn't just, it's going to be a great person, you have to tell you they're going to be really expensive, but you know what? No. You say, let me tell you about this person, and set that person up with anticipation. Don't just show up and wing it. Do your research. Talk about that, listen to what's important to that person. Find that interesting little tidbit so that when you say, hey, I just had a conversation with this next speaker. And what I found out was we have something really in common. And all of a sudden you start telling a story about you, how you just had a conversation with that person. That's engaging. So it's learning how to be facile with what's important. What does that show? It shows relational intelligence. And it says, I'm really excited about this person who we brought in. I think you're going to find a lot of value in what this person has to say. So it's just shifting from facts and just a linear to, hey, let me give you a little window into what just happened.
Let's talk a little bit about the whole notion of telling stories around product. I want to unpack that a little further because
Sure.
Generally, most wholesalers are going to tell it's funny, we call it a product story. It's oftentimes the farthest thing from a story as I believe you would assess it. How do we begin to approach stories around products, especially as I alluded to earlier, when those products are filled with important factoids that the advisor needs to know in order to help make a decision about my company's product versus the competitors? How do I begin to approach stories in that framework?
No, it's another great question. I think the most powerful way to use a story in that regard is the impact. It's not about just benefits and features. It's about the impact that product could have on their client, for their client. In other words, put that client as the main character in the story.
I got a question for you.
Relatable.
Do I put, because you and I talked and wholesalers, do I put the client at the center of the story or do I put the advisor at the center of the story? Because everybody's in it for themselves, right? At some degree. So you would recommend either one?
Either one. It all depends on what you're trying to do. So if you can say, listen, when I wrote that short blog, that short article that'll be in advance of this podcast, and I was thinking, this is my process. I said, okay, let me put myself in the wholesaler's point of view and describe their situation. So I said, it's pitch day at the wholesalers conference. You've taken the stage and are standing in front of a room full of financial advisors whose eyes are half glazed by relentless droning of ghost-like speakers and number-crunching slides. You stand unfazed. You're actually feeling a bit excited. You pause, You take a deep breath, you survey the audience, you smile. You look at one person directly, and in a confident and steady voice, you ask, so, what do you say when someone walks up to you and says, what do you do? So that's what I carved out. That was a story.
Wholesalers.
So I could go on the stage
hold that thought, Rob. I want to comment.
Yep.
Wholesalers, I want you to go back and I want you to listen to that. I want you to literally go to your iPhone, hit the either 15 or 30-second rewind. I can't remember what it was. Hit that a couple times. Go back and listen to that again. Because what Rob has just articulated and knows as a professional speaker is that setup right there. You took your position on the platform. You took that imperceptible deep breath. You zeroed in on a member of the audience and you let loose with your opening statement. That's the way that you engage the audience. Rob, I wanted to make sure that didn't go away, because if any learning was valuable inside of this discussion, that one certainly was.
And so what I did inside of that, Rob, was I described all of the things that I teach when I teach my programs on presence and storytelling. Every one of those things is a reminder of what I encourage people to do. So in the story, I'm putting in all of the information that is critical for what the learning, for what I want people to be thinking about. They can go back and listen to it. They say, no, I'm feeling comfortable and confident. I take the stage, I pause, I take a deep breath, I look at the audience, I smile, I look at someone directly, and I connect with them, and I ask a question. So that is if you practice just that, from a presence perspective, it's very powerful. So inside of a story like this, you could say, okay, let's make it a wholesaler story. Wholesaler comes up and says, so here you are, financial advisor. You're walking into a one-on-one conversation with the top client you've been trying to get in front of for years. You put your hand on the doorknob, you take a breath, you pause, you open the door, you walk in. So in other words, can as a wholesaler, tell a story that is relevant and to the financial advisor, that encourages them to be their best self when they're going in to connect with their clients.
Let me ask you a question about this whole notion of storytelling. How creative do I need to be? You see, I suspect that there might be some segment of our listening audience that thinks, well, crafting stories takes creativity, and I don't consider myself to be a wildly creative person. I'm super good at my product. I know my product cold. I know the competitor's product cold. I know how to SELL sell, but I'm not terribly creative. Rob, does storytelling require creativity?
Well, there's a notion that people think that they're not creative. Everyone's creative. And so I'd say, yes, it takes a bit of creativity, but no, it's more craft than anything else.
Define the difference.
Explain the difference is if I know how to tell a story. In other words, I'm going to put the person, I'm going to have a main character. So that main character is a person. So I just, like in my story, I said, okay, it has to have a main character. They have to have a worthy challenge. They have to describe the context of the situation. I said, pitch day at the wholesaler's conference. That's the context. You've taken the stage. You, wholesaler, main character. And so I put up a worthy challenge, which is you have to overcome this audience that is half asleep and glazed over. So how do you go about doing that? You do it by connecting. So it's a formula that you can follow. And when you learn the formula, then you can just apply that formula in a number of different ways. And you don't have to be the most expressive person in the world. You just have to write down that formula and think from the other person's point of view. So it's less creative. It's just more of a step-by-step process that you can learn, and then it's trial and error in practice.
You come from a performing arts background in part, and I'm just curious, I don't want to ask the obviously answered question. How much does a performing arts background, how much if you were the drama class nerd in high school, how much does that help you in crafting stories and delivering better stories?
Anytime I work with someone that has a little bit of background in theater or has been in play in high school, what it does is it clicks them in and goes, "Oh, I used to do that. Oh, I remember that." And all of a sudden they remember it. When I work with someone that has never done it before, I'm introducing them to some really basic core exercises and that anyone can learn. It's what you did at the beginning of the podcast. You almost did it like a radio drama. You went, "Wholesalers," and you allowed yourself to get into it. So I work with people, and if they have kids, I said, "Do you read stories to your kids? How do you read those stories? Learn how to be more fluid and flexible with your voice. Let it have more expression." So we'll work on the voice. Then all of a sudden, they're starting to get a feel for it. They know what it is to practice, why they would practice it, and then how they can put it into practice. And I think one of the most important things that I learned in years in theater was the discipline of practice. And I think that's where people say, "Well, okay, I'm just going to," I would ask people who are listening right now, how many times have you just, okay, if you're going to be speaking by yourself or you're speaking with other people, you're thinking about it in the cab ride over, as opposed to thinking about it well in advance and preparing this and practicing it.
Practicing out loud, wholesalers. Because most wholesalers, and I'm going to lump everybody together because I believe it's true, most wholesalers are not practicing their presentations out loud. Most wholesalers are winging it. And there's another level for you to achieve, which is a whole nother podcast for another day. Wholesalers, if you are interested in having Rob work with your sales team, if you're interested in having him work with your financial advisors, you want to bring him into a meeting, etc., hit up WMM Speakers Bureau at Wholesaler Mastermind Speakers Bureau at WMMspeakers.com. Rob Salafia, thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thanks, Rob.
My pleasure. Wholesalers, come back next time for another episode of the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. You'll find all of our content at wholesalermasterminds.com, and the podcast can be found at iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play.